The Boston Red Sox missed out on yet another key free agent. So where exactly do they go from here?
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Maljanian, former ESPN social media associate and currently host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I'm here every day to discuss everything going on with the Boston Red Sox, whether they aren't doing anything or they're doing a lot. So make sure that you subscribe on any podcast platform because Locked On is your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Well, everybody, as you all know, yesterday was a really disappointing day for the Boston Red Sox as they missed out on yet another free agent that they were supposedly targeting in Pete Alonso. Now, the question is, where do they go from here? Because there is still plenty of offseason left is the biggest thing I do need to remind people of. There's time still, and we're going to discuss a lot of that on today's show. I have a special guest with me who you all know as a really talented baseball personality, Paul Hembekides. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm not sure my wife would agree with the notion that I'm a talented baseball personality, but I do appreciate the kind words. And I think you and I have had a lot of similar thoughts on the Red Sox offseason to date, what they might still do from this point forward. So this is a conversation that I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah, it's definitely been a little bit frustrating because the way the Red Sox have operated over the last few years, they're really not acting like a team that wants to compete. And this is a team that had a young roster in 2025, went to the playoffs, got great exposure for some of these younger players to what the postseason stage looks like. So now it's about building on that and continuing to improve this team to hopefully be a true World Series threat, especially with the division that they're in. I mean, you have the Blue Jays who just went to the World Series. The Yankees are always competitive. The Orioles just got better. Thanks to them for snagging our guy in Pete Alonso. Not happy about that. But it kind of leaves them in an interesting spot now because now they're at the point where moves have to be made. And, it felt like Alonso was a really good fit in Boston. I know that they were hesitant a little bit due to his age, and I don't think they wanted to give him the 5 years that he got from Baltimore. So what are your thoughts on that? Did you feel like the Red Sox were a good landing spot for Alonso?
I think most any place would have been a good landing spot for Pete Alonso, who has demonstrated the ability to spray the baseball in the air, pole to pole, and in Fenway Park. He would have definitely put up some gaudy numbers. But truthfully, I don't think that the Red Sox were nearly as interested internally in Pete Alonso as maybe some of the reporting suggested. And the reason for that is because I don't think Craig Breslow really values the position of first base. And I think the way in which he managed the Rafael Devers situation indicates that he's a lot more fixated upon players with multifactorial skills, players that provide more value on the defensive spectrum. And that's why I don't think Pete Alonso is ever number one on his list. If anything, I think he's probably fairly happy today that he may have been a big reason why that price was driven up to 5 years and $155 million. Pete Alonso is going to play this year at 31. I think he's going to make the Orioles a lot better from day one. But I think what you'll see that is much likelier is that the Red Sox attack the first base position from a bulk standpoint, whether it be looking to the Cardinals and maybe trading for Wilson Contreras. Maybe it's moving Christian Campbell over there and platooning him with Tristan Casas. I think that's more in line with what they're likely to do because Craig Breslow, as you know, is a modern thinker. And the modern thinker just doesn't value the first base position the way that fans have traditionally. And thus, I'm not at all surprised that Pete Alonso found himself somewhere aside from Boston.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because the approach that Craig Breslow has taken, I think, is one that does require patience. And a lot of Red Sox fans don't have that patience because he really, I think, was concerned about the defense because, as we know, Pete Alonso's defense is a drawback to his game. And I think that's something that Craig Breslow definitely had reservations about, because he has made it clear, our infield defense was one of the weakest aspects of our game the last couple seasons. So that's something that we need to adjust. And I think, when they brought in Alex Bregman last year, great defensive third baseman, that was one of the biggest reasons that drew them to him, was because he could be a steady force at third base. And that was part of the whole thing that caused the Rafael Devers drama, was they weren't confident enough in his defense at third. And they were like, we have a better defensive third baseman that we can bring in here. And Breslow has constantly reiterated we need to focus on defense. And that's something for sure that probably held them back a little bit from Alonso. But what I will say, the Red Sox lineup right now is still missing that pop. They don't have a lot of, home run threats in the lineup right now. And that's something that they definitely need to address prior to spring training, because this is a team that really didn't have that pop of a guy who can hit in the middle of the lineup and just hit one out of Fenway with runners in scoring position and know, okay, this pitcher is going to be really scared to see this guy come up right now. And since they've traded Devers, everybody's waiting for them to replace what he brought to the lineup, and it just hasn't happened yet. So the pressure is kind of on now for them to find that piece in the middle of the lineup. And while Alonso wasn't great defensively, I feel like his bat would have been perfect at Fenway.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, individual defense is massively overrated in the game today. There are far fewer balls in play now than there have been in seasons previously, of course, because pitching is so much better. Whip is, across the league continues to skyrocket because velocity continues to skyrocket. I also think the intelligence that we have now indicates that teams can make average position players in the field better because of their positioning ability. Obviously, we've banned the shift, so you can only do so much and go so far. But we know exactly where everyone's spray chart tells us to play now, and thus I think you can see an average player at a position defensively become a good one, and a below average one play up to average, which is to say Pete Alonso's defense is not nearly a good enough reason not to sign him. I am, though, very curious now what trick he has up his sleeve, because you hit the nail on the head. This Red Sox team does still need a lot more pop. A club that ranked 15th in the league last year in home runs, and that just isn't good enough, not in the context of the American League East, where you have to be able to score runs to win. That has always been the case. It has never been the case more acutely than it is right now. And so I think you'll see the Red Sox be active on the trade market. You and I have both mentioned Ketel Marte as a legitimate possibility for them, and I maintain that that's potentially the first option for them in terms of improving their lineup this offseason. I think a reunion with Alex Bregman is still likely, or at least certainly possible. And I think Bo Bichette, though not a traditional bopper, is still going to be someone that improves your lineup considerably and definitely checks that box on the defensive spectrum that I think you and I believe that Craig Breslow really decides he feels is a super important component in building a baseball team.
Yeah, there's a lot of people right now who are super fired up with Craig Breslow, not in a good way. And so he's kind of, in the hot seat right now to see what he does. But last offseason, he missed out on Max Fried, and then he responded by trading for Garrett Crochet. So I do feel like we do need to give him some time. At this time last year, Garrett Crochet was not in a Red Sox uniform yet, and then they went and signed Alex Bregman. So I'm urging people to take a deep breath when it comes to this offseason, because it is not over yet. Obviously, the winter meetings were underwhelming. A lot of people wanted Alonso, but my interest now in how I'm monitoring this is because the Red Sox missed out on Alonso. Do you think that's going to drive up the price for them to potentially trade for a guy like Marte, with the Diamondbacks maybe knowing, well, the Red Sox are approaching us a little bit more desperate now because they missed on a key free agent. So therefore, we're going to ask for more in a potential trade.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, ultimately, Arizona is going to trade Ketel Marte to whatever team provides them the most value. But the Boston Red Sox here are going to be held hostage because everyone across the league knows they have to improve their lineup. I just happen to think that the Ketel Marte connection to Boston is just perfect because he's going to occupy a position of need. Christian Campbell was not nearly good enough last year as a rookie. He's going to have to earn his at-bats now. And I think he's going to probably do so. And look, you know better than I do, but probably a super utility type role in which he plays across different positions and primarily hits left-handed pitching and figures out how to cover the top half of the zone, which he obviously was not ready to do as a rookie. We'll see what Tristan Casas looks like when he comes back from his injury. He's someone that I still really like on the big side of a platoon because it's huge left-handed power. I've not given up on him quite yet. You know exactly what you have in-house in Alex Bregman because you had him there for a year. Really like the player. I think the only reason he opted out is because he thinks he can get a $100 million guarantee this offseason, which he almost certainly can. But to spin it all the way back around to Ketel Marte, it's the perfect match. And the reason it's the perfect match is because the Red Sox have young, controllable, attracting pitching assets the Arizona Diamondbacks desperately need. And if you need to, this could also be the ideal Jarren Duran team. It seems obvious to me that Jarren Duran is the most likely Red Sox player to be traded this offseason. And even though he doesn't necessarily fill the immediate need that the Diamondbacks have from a pitching standpoint, that's not exactly how GMs operate, as you well know. They're doing asset for asset trades, not what do I need right now trades. And Jarren Duran in Arizona, by the way, is a perfect fit alongside Corbin Carroll because they're going to double and triple you to death. But at the same time, provide them another top of the lineup hitter with Corbin Carroll. You add maybe a starting pitcher like Connolly Early, maybe Peyton Tolley, maybe Kyson Witherspoon in a 2-for-1 type swap. And all of a sudden, the Red Sox have the best second baseman in all of baseball. And the Diamondbacks can potentially kill two birds with one stone.
Get you right back to my discussion with Paul Hembekides. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Game Time, because if you're ever looking to score last minute tickets to any live event, whether that's a concert, sporting event, comedy show, you name it, Game Time is 100% the place for you. And with the World Cup coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. So that's why Game Time is so clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. Game Time really is the best because it helps you save money. And also something really exciting that the Locked On Network has launched is the Everydayer Club. If you already make Locked On Red Sox your first listen of the day and you've already made Locked On the #1 sports podcast network, why not expand on that? You can take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Red Sox with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to the link in the YouTube description to subscribe. You'll get all kinds of benefits because you'll meet other Red Sox fans, and it's fantastic. So make sure that you subscribe to that today. Yeah, I know there's been some hesitancy with the Red Sox front office on wanting to move Connolly Early. I think they were really impressed with what they saw from him in 2025. I mean, the poor kid got thrown into an elimination game in the postseason because Lucas Giolito was hurt. And they said, oh, by the way, if we lose this game, we're out. No pressure. Good luck. And I was very impressed by the poise and composure that he showed in that really short sample size that we saw from him. And I know that's something that the Red Sox are a little bit hesitant about giving up, but ultimately this is about improving the team for right now. And Craig Breslow, really what he's done in his tenure so far has really worked to build up that pitching depth. And the Red Sox do have a lot of that now. So if that's the piece that it's going to take to push this trade through, I'm definitely doing it, because Marte is a guy who, like you said, would fill multiple needs. They don't have a second baseman, an everyday second baseman right now. That was just a platoon position because they, I think, truly believed going into last season that Christian Campbell was going to live up to expectations, and then he didn't. And so it would be a tough gamble to take to go into 2026, just assuming that Christian Campbell could be the everyday second baseman. I think that would be a disappointment. And that would be something to me that I would say this Red Sox team is not in a place to where they can truly contend, not only in their own division, but just in the American League in general. And I think Marte just provides a lot of value that the Red Sox need. And it's interesting that you bring up Duran, because I've talked about him extensively on the show and how he's definitely the #1 trade piece, not because he's a bad player, because the Red Sox just have too many outfielders and there's kind of seeming like an odd man out in this situation. And it feels like he's the odd man out, especially because of Breslow prioritizing defense. They don't want to trade Cedar Rafaela. I mean, they extended him. His defense is too valuable to give up. Wilyer Abreu, 2-time Gold Glover. I don't see them being super sold on moving him either. And obviously they're not going to move Roman Anthony. So it feels like Jarren Duran is kind of the odd man out there when it comes to those outfielders. So it feels like destiny that he's going to be moved this offseason. It's just a matter of what kind of package he's going to be in. And it just feels like it makes a lot of sense to me that Marte comes to Boston, because he just fills a lot of what they need right now.
Yeah, there's so many threads on which I want to pull that you just went through. So the first of which is I think Jarren Duran is a marvelous player. In fact, a somewhat underrated player. But Craig Breslow, like a lot of GMs now, operate purely from a capital V value standpoint, and he full well knows that you're never going to be able to extract more value from Jarren Duran than right now, coming off a great season and then subsequently a good season, knowing full well that Roman Anthony, future superstar, Ceddanne Rafaela, and Wilyer Abreu, who he does think can be an everyday player who can hit lefties, is going to be in your outfield for the next, theoretically, half decade. And you have that position set. Like, you're going to be set out there as well as you have since the glory days, truly. The Red Sox outfield is going to be an outstandingly good position. Jarren Duran, as I said, now's the best time to move him for all the obvious reasons from the perspective of the amount of control that he'll provide another club. And it's fairly cheap control considering the player that he is and the WAR accumulator that he has been. From a self-scouting standpoint, you really hit the nail on the head there with the Craig Breslow point that you made. He's a pitching guy. Like, Craig Breslow has done about as good a job as most any executive across baseball in multiple stops in harvesting good young pitching. And the reason why I think now would be the optimal time to trade Connolly early is because the most recent thing that we saw is the most attractive data point that he could ever put forth. He shoved in the playoffs against the best lineup in baseball in a hostile environment. Now is the best time to trade Connolly early because from a scouting standpoint, he's a number 3 starter who's a very likely high probability back end starting pitcher. And if everything goes right, he's a number 2 to 3. But as you well know, very rarely does everything go right. I think now is the perfect time to capitalize on the fact that he came up, demonstrated a slow heartbeat, and showed the kind of guile that he can pitch with, can get out big league hitters, knowing full well that you're not trading a future ace. Now's the time where I would trade him. And if I could, hang on to Kyson Witherspoon, who I think has potential top-end stuff, and hang on to Peyton Tolley, who I'm more confident can give me 150 innings next year and at least demonstrate the ability to be like a down-ballot Cy Young guy in the future, because I do think the stuff plays up more than Early's does. I like those low-slot lefties with multiple swing and miss pitches, where I think Early is more of a mid-rotation starter because he's going to be someone that more relies upon his defense behind him.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by both of those guys, and I'm really happy that both of them got their opportunity in 2025. Obviously, it was due to the Red Sox just having a plethora of injuries and just needing options, so they kept calling guys up. But I really do like the fact that they both got some major league experience in 2025, because that definitely gives the Red Sox leverage when it comes to a potential trade. And this is where that comes into play of what you're talking about, of they have a lot of good young controllable pitching. There's no point in hanging on to all those guys when you have other areas of need on this roster that you need to improve. And it feels like this is the perfect match. I just hope the Red Sox don't come back and say we're not willing to give up all of that, because that is what I'm worried about when it comes to a potential trade, is we don't want to give up Connolly early. So sorry now.
Right. So I view most prospects or guys that have recently been promoted as I do most players, and those players are assets. These are, look, this is how the modern general manager thinks. I mean, we have become attached to these players because we're people, and there's an interpersonal part of rooting for these teams that we come to know and love. And so if you're a GM that thinks that way, that acts that way, you're going to wind up operating at a disadvantage, because then you're using emotion to drive decisions that have to be made calculatedly. And I don't like that approach. I'm very confident, given the fact that Craig Breslow did what he did during the middle of last season when it came to Rafael Devers, a fan favorite, that he is not going to operate that way. He recognizes that my pitching staff and my development pipeline from that standpoint is an area of strength for us. And if I was able to do what I did with Peyton Tolley and Connolly early, who's to say that I can't do that with future pitchers? The Padres have done this extraordinarily well under A.J. Preller. They scout and develop in Latin America better than any club in baseball, and they're able to turn those assets into major league pieces and continue to win at the big league level because of it. That is the genius of what the Padres do, and the genius, candidly, of what the Red Sox should start doing. I think that the pitching surplus that they have provides them a clear and obvious opportunity to trade for present-day big leaguers from a lineup standpoint that can improve this club considerably in 2026, because this division is going to be an absolute murderer's row. And if you can't average 5 runs a game, or at least close to it, you're not going to have any shot within the context of the American League East.
Yeah, which is scary because, the Blue Jays also got better. And, they're tough again. The Orioles did not have a good season in 2025, but they were like, we want to compete. So they are trying to compete. It just feels like every team in this division is in compete now mode. And that's what's really scary. So the Red Sox need to do something to stand out. And that also takes me to, the starting rotation and where the starting rotation is at right now, because obviously they have Garrett Crochet, they have Brian Bello, traded for Sonny Gray, made another trade for Johan Oviedo. They have guys like Connolly Early and Peyton Tooley in the mix. Hunter Dobbins, who was hurt a lot of last season. Cutter Crawford, who missed the entirety of the 2025 season. So it feels like they have options, but I'm still not sold on them having a definitive number 2. I feel like it's kind of Garrett Crochet and then a bunch of guys who could slot into maybe that 3-4 spot. But do you feel like the Red Sox need to still add to their rotation in order to truly compete within their division?
I think it has to be their second priority. To me, the Red Sox number 1 priority right now needs to be improving its lineup. They need to score more runs next season. Of that, I can say for certain. I do think, though, that the point you made about who's starting game 2 for me in a playoff series is the most important one to make. The Red Sox have about as much depth from a starting pitching standpoint as any club in the American League, probably the most of any team in baseball aside from the Phillies, my favorite club. But the Red Sox lineup isn't deep enough and doesn't have nearly enough potency, at least in the middle of it from a run generating standpoint, as things stand right now. So sure, I'd like to sit here and say that attacking the starting rotation and adding a number 2 starter to slot in front of Sonny Gray is something that would improve the club. But what Major League Baseball team is not going to be made better by adding a number 2 starter? The question is, to what extent do you prioritize it? I happen to believe that they're in love with Joe Ryan from Minnesota, and they would be willing to potentially pay more than 100 cents on the dollar to obtain him. My question for you is, if we put together a similar package, we'll do the same exact one. Let's say Jarren, Duran, and some one of Tolley or Early or Witherspoon to the Minnesota Twins for Joe Ryan versus the exact same package for Ketel Marte. Because I do think you're talking about comparable packages, considering the skills, the ages, and the development arc of both of those players. Which of those packages in a vacuum do you believe to be more palatable?
Great conversation here with Paul Hembekides of ESPN. I'll get you right back to that. But if you're looking to get into sports betting or make any extra money, please check out FanDuel, because you can make so much money betting on all of your favorite sports, between NFL Sundays or NBA or NHL or college sports, you name it. FanDuel is 100% the betting place for you. You can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. It's a great way to make lots of money, so I highly encourage you to check out FanDuel today and start making that money. Yeah, I think I would still do Marte, because it feels like that's more of a priority right now. Like, I love Joe Ryan. I wanted him at the trade deadline. That obviously fell through. I want him this offseason too. That would be great if they could just go and get both, and they're just willing to give up all kinds of players to get both of them here. I'm not seeing that happen. But I will say, at the end of the day, I do feel like they can make it work with their rotation. I'm not 100% confident that all of these players are going to be what they think they're going to be in the rotation. However, if it came down to an either or of Marte or Joe Ryan, I would say that Ketel Marte is more of a priority and something that right now would put them in a better place going into 2026. Whereas if they were to trade for Joe Ryan, and then that was the only other move they made, and then maybe brought Bregman back, it's like, okay, great. Their pitching is in good shape, but who's going to hit on this team? So it almost feels like, because they made a couple moves for the pitching already, they might feel like Sonny Gray can be a guy who can really step up for them. I'm not as confident that he's going to be a number 2. And again, that's an issue they still have. But if I'm looking at an either or type of situation, I do think the lineup is the glaring weakness right now. Like, they need guys who can hit. They need guys who can drive in runs with runners in scoring position, because that was a huge problem for them towards the end of the season last year, was they just couldn't drive in runs in general when guys were in scoring position. It was abysmal, and it was so frustrating, and they just need that to help get them over that hump. But I do believe that they really do like Joe Ryan. I know I've heard multiple things about how much Craig Breslow is interested in him. But I did also hear recently that the Twins don't even want to trade him. So who knows what's going to happen with that. But I will say, if it comes down to it and you're offering the same exact package, I would want them to push more for Marte, because I just think he fills more areas of need that they have right now. And with the pitching, they can just kind of try to, if they're going to go in with this rotation, kind of try to see who they can slot in.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say before I let you go is this. Just to nerd out for just a second. The way that Craig Breslow is going to look at this very likely is which of those two players, and our hypothetical here, Ketel Marte or Joe Ryan, which one is going to help me accumulate more WAR? Not just in terms of how much WAR they produce this season, but how much they produce this season in relation to their replacement, of course. So if you look at the second base position league-wide, it's dreadful. Ketel Marte is the best one. And if you put Ketel Marte at second base, you're improving your club by something like 5 or 6 wins, which is a staggering total.
Yeah.
If you put Ryan in your starting rotation instead of your hypothetical number 5 starter and slot him in between Garrett Crochet and Sonny Gray, you're probably improving your 2026 club by something like 3 wins. So if you're just doing the back of the napkin right there, you can look at those two players in a vacuum and say definitively that Ketel Marte is going to be more additive, more valuable to the 2026 Red Sox than Joe Ryan, especially when considering the depth and the infrastructure that Boston has built from a pitching standpoint.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this is where all of that comes into play of, they address the pitching. Craig Breslow already said the lineup is now our priority. Because he's a pitching guy, like you mentioned earlier, I don't think he's ever going to close the door on acquiring pitching. And if the right opportunity comes up, then I think they do it. I know he said also that he's comfortable with keeping all the outfielders and he's not going to force a trade. But this just feels like a situation where it's the right move to make now. And I do think the Diamondbacks would be on board with that. Jarren Duran has so much upside that he can offer to a team. And I just feel like that should be the next priority. If they can go and they can bring Bregman back and they can bring in Marte, I would feel a lot more confident with this lineup going into 2026 because, there's good pitching in this division. Again, they've got to be able to hit good pitching. And it just feels like Marte could be a strong middle of the order bat that the Red Sox have been talking about all offseason.
I think you've nailed this. I'll let you go now, but I'll say that you and I see this eye to eye. Ketel Marte to the Red Sox, to me, is a match made in heaven. You have the assets for it. You have the vacancy at second base for it. Let's send it in.
So you just heard from Paul Hembekides of ESPN, very talented baseball personality, often seen on the show Get Up early in the mornings talking baseball. And he seems sold on Ketel Marte to Boston. And I do know that the Red Sox are very much in on Marte. They're trying to figure out what a trade package could look like, but it feels like a match made in heaven because of the fact that the Diamondbacks are looking for young, controllable starting pitching in return. And the Red Sox certainly have that. And I've talked extensively on this show about the Red Sox pitching depth. And one of the things to keep in mind with all of this is they could go and get Marte. It would solve a couple of problems. However, it would probably mean giving up Marcelo Meyer unless Alex Bregman doesn't come back. Because again, Alex Bregman's market, like I talked about early on in the offseason, determines a lot here. Because if Alex Bregman comes back and they have Marte at second base, then the infield is pretty much set and there isn't really a place for Marcelo Meyer. And there's definitely upside still with him. The injury history over the last couple seasons when it comes to Marcelo is certainly something to keep in mind. But overall, he is a guy that could be beneficial to another team as long as he stays healthy. Showed a ton of defensive upside in the games that he did play in 2025. So that would be an interesting thought as well, is could Marcelo Meyer be included in a trade package for Marte? I'm inclined to feel like, yes, it's definitely a possibility. Now, if you look at where the Red Sox are at right now, they should 100% do that. I know they talked all of these things about Marcelo Meyer and him being part of the future. He was part of that big three with Christian Campbell and Roman Anthony. But the biggest thing that I'm looking at now is, well, does he truly provide the level of value that the Red Sox need in order for him to be like not tradable? Absolutely not. Marcelo is a good baseball player, but he's not somebody that I'm holding on to if it means holding up a Marte trade. However, the problem with that is if the Red Sox do go after Marte and say they do trade Meyer in the deal and then Alex Bregman doesn't come back, then they have a hole again at third base. So Alex Bregman's market is really going to help fill out a lot of these holes and answer a lot of these questions when it comes to the Boston Red Sox, because it's a really risky game to play if the Marte trade were to happen very soon. Not implying anything. And Marcelo Meyer was to be in that trade. And then the Red Sox are like, what do we do at third base? Because Alex Bregman's market hasn't been determined yet. So there are different avenues that the Red Sox could take here. Some combination of Jarren Duran, Marcelo Meyer, and Connolly Early, or Peyton Tooley instead of Connolly Early, depending on who the Diamondbacks like and who the Red Sox would want to give up. That, I'm thinking, could be the type of combination that gets this done for the Red Sox to really see this thing through and push a Marte trade over the edge. But there's no doubt about the fact that he would be a really good fit in Boston. So like I said on yesterday's show, time for Craig Breslow and company to take action. So we'll have to see what happens. But I really appreciate you tuning in to Locked On Red Sox always and making it your first listen of every single day. If Locked On Red Sox made your Spotify Wrapped, I know it did. I've had some people send it to me. Prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social platform and we'll drop you a code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure your second listen is Locked On MLB. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I'll catch you on the flip side.